What's up, Thrashers, and welcome back once again to the Thrash Maniac 99 YouTube channel, and man, I think I've set a record for most response videos in a week, because I'm back with a third response video. So this is another thread that started up fairly recently in the YouTube metal community. And this thread was started by Hammerheart Album Reviews. I believe that's the name of his channel. The link for his channel will be in the description box below. And I've seen Metal Ben do this, so I thought, screw it, I might as well hop on this train too. And this thread is bands with flawless discographies. Now, I've seen some people do like a lot of bands. I whittled my list down to 10, and basically, I'm just here to talk about 10 bands that have no bad albums in their catalogs. I have a few honorable mentions I want to quickly shout out for you all right now, and those are Asphyx, Cannibal Corpse, Merciful Fate, and Overkill. I would definitely say they are more than worthy to be on a list like this. However, I think I got 10 bands that I think have had better discographies overall that I think are more deserving to be on this list, for me at least. It's not a top 10 list, it's just 10 bands that I want to showcase that have flawless discographies. We're going in alphabetical order here, so let's get started with the first band, and that is Alice in Chains. So, Alice in Chains, for me, I've always considered to be a metal band. Hell, I'm going to go as far as call them a doom metal band, because they have slow songs, heavy, simplistic style riffs, and the lyrical content is fitting for a doom band. Death, depression, drugs, sorrow, all that kind of stuff. Alice in Chains, I feel like from the very beginning of their career through currently, no bad releases. Even their two EPs, Sap and Jar of Flies, are very unique EPs for them that showcase their more softer side of their sound. But in terms of studio albums, and I forgot to mention the requirements to be on this list is to have at least 4 studio albums. And Alice in Chains has had 6 studio albums. Yeah, 1990 Facelift, classic debut, Dirt, 2 years after that, one of my favorite albums of all time. The Tripod album to 95, kinda underrated. Black Gives Way to Blue, their return in 2009, was glorious. The Devil Put Dinosaurs Here was a great follow-up. And Rainier Fog, while it'd be lower on my ranking, which it was my least favorite Alice in Chains album, still a great album. Like, every album they put out is fantastic for different reasons, and they evolve a little bit here and there, incorporating more darker elements and incorporating more somber influence here and there, give or take on the songs within the album. So I would argue Alice in Chains, no bad albums, flawless catalog. What more can be said that hasn't been said already? Now for the second band, we're gonna start getting into a bit of a, for the next 5 bands, we're going all death metal for the next 5 bands, because, well, death metal's had a plethora of bands with flawless discographies, and the first one I'm talking about is Bolt Thrower. So yeah, Bolt Thrower, of course, a legendary death metal band that formed in '86 out of Coventry, England, and top to bottom, their catalog is albums that are good to classic. You know, first album, In Battle There Is No Law, when they were a little bit more on the grindcore side of things, still a fucking riff fest for a grindcore early death metal contributor. Realm of Chaos, featuring one of the heaviest guitar tones of all time. War Master is a classic. Fourth Crusade is a classic. For Victory is a classic. Mercenary, good album, but definitely lower in the rankings if I were to rank both of our albums in the future. Honor, Valor, Pride stepped it up a little bit. And then their final album, Those Once Loyal, was a modern classic for damn sure. It's a shame that they're no longer around, especially after what happened to Martin Kearns, their last drummer, who passed away in 2015. But we got Memoriam from Carl Willits now, and their last album was actually really fucking good. So, pretty much we're gonna be getting Memoriam, and then there's some Bolt Thrower-esque bands out there. The biggest one going right now for me is Frozen Soul. That debut Crypt of Ice last year was brilliant. But Bolt Thrower it was always interesting to hear what they always had in store for every one of their albums. You know, starting off in the more grind side of death metal, then they became proper death metal, even going into a bit of doom territory, and then incorporating a lot of killer groove in their songwriting. So, Bolt Thrower, I don't think you could do a list like this without mentioning Bolt Thrower, because they more than deserve to be on here. Next up, this one might be a bit controversial because there's a lot of people that hate one album, but for me, I think it's a really good album. But we're going to talk Carcass next. Carcass, I think all of their albums are good to classic again, because, and they always evolved a lot over their career. You know, you start off with Reek of Putrefaction when they were more gore grind. Yeah, the production was terrible, but the energy behind the music was fantastic, and it's a fun album. Symphonies of Sickness was an amazing sophomore effort in showcasing that they are not grindcore anymore. They're much more death metal, and they would pretty much go death metal throughout while changing things up. Then you get to Necroticism in 91, where they pretty much solidified their death metal sound, but also got a bit proggy, and also kind of laying down the groundwork for melodic death metal for the years to come. Of course, Hard Work is one of the greatest metal albums ever made, and it was the starting point of melodic death metal, so you got that going for you. Now the controversial album Swan Song, when they went more melodic death and roll, but I personally like the album. I guess I could kind of get why some people don't like it, because it's nothing like Hard Work, but I like it for that reason, because they wanted to change things up and not sound like a carbon copy of what they had just done on the previous two albums. And Swan Song had some really good tracks on there, and yeah, it was their last album before they broke up not too long after, but then they come back, and in 2013, one of the greatest comeback albums of all time. I talked about it in my comeback albums video, Surgical Steel, and it also was my favorite album of the 2010s. And then last year with Torn Arteries, which was a great follow-up. So I would say top to bottom, Carcass's discography is flawless. Even Swan Song, people. But now for the next band, I'll go out and say I think this next band is the band with the best overall discography in terms of studio output, because every single studio album is a classic. Death. I will say, hands down, if this were a top 10 list, Death would be number one, because all 7 albums were just absolutely phenomenal. Scream Bloody Gore, kind of pretty much the first true, proper death metal album. Yeah, there was still a lot of thrash, but you had more groove in there than, say, Possess 7 Churches. Leprosy being the important one for laying the groundwork for death metal proper, because much more diverse songwriting, heavier sound, better production. Well, it's debatable. I like the production on Scream Bloody Gore personally, but regardless, Spiritual Healing, very underrated album. I absolutely love that one. Human, when they became more technical death metal or progressive death metal, and it was a monumental achievement. Individual Thought Patterns, when they were at their most technical and really embracing more of their melodic side. And then for me, the best album they ever did, Symbolic, where they pretty much said, okay, we're going to become progressive death metal going forward. And it's a phenomenal album. And then their final album, Sound of Perseverance, is a classic as well. I mean, despite where I ranked it in the Death albums ranking, all their albums are amazing. I can go back and listen to them all and not be disappointed. I would hands down say the band with the best discography is Death. And if anybody says different, they're wrong. Next up, we're actually now already at the halfway point of this list. Next up, we get into another death metal juggernaut, and that is Immolation. I would say every Immolation album, kind of like Carcass and both, are good to outstanding. Actually, I'll say great to outstanding. You know, you got their classic debut, Dawn of Possession, which I talked about briefly during my Rarest CDs video, and that album could be my number one. It's kind of neck and neck with another one that I'll talk about in just a second, but yeah, Here and After, 5 years later, but it was a great follow-up, and you can definitely hear where they was going to go going forward. Failure for Gods was another great follow-up. Close to a World Below. That and Dawn of Possession are like battling back and forth for my favorite Immolation album, and it's so evil, it's so brutal, just what? Unholy Cult was a solid follow-up as well, and then when they changed lyrical themes away from the whole anti-religious side and into more of the society, political lyrics, you get into albums like Harnessing Ruin, Shadow and the Light, which kind of signaled that changeover. Then Majesty and Decay in 2010, which was a brilliant album. Kingdom of Conspiracy was another great one that followed. Atonement 2017, and that was one of the best albums that came out that year. Fucking brutal stuff right there. And then their latest album that came out earlier this year, Acts of God, was an amazing album in its own right as well. So I would say top to bottom, check out everything Immolation. Of course, you can't talk about Immolation without bringing up their just as evil brother, Incantation. I would say Incantation is another prime example of death metal done perfectly in terms of the discography. You know, you start off with Onward to Golgotha, which was a raw, nasty, disgusting, evil album. Mortal Throne of Nazarene / Upon the Throne of Apocalypse, both amazing in their own rights. Different production, but the songs absolutely slay. Diabolical Conquest, which I will say probably is my favorite Incantation album. You'll find that out in the rankings one day. That's a masterpiece. Infernal Storm, solid follow-up. Blasphemy, yeah, could be the weakest, but it's still pretty damn good. I would say really good album, honestly. Decimate Christendom was a great kind of return to like the Infernal Storm, Diabolical Conquest era a little bit. Primordial Domination, a very underrated album. And then you get into the modern era stuff with Dan Swano mixing and mastering with Vanquish and Vengeance, Dirges of Elysium. Profane Nexus may be the weakest one out of the modern run, but still really good. And then their last album, Sect of Vile Divinities, was an awesome album in its own right. So pretty much both bands, Immolation and Incantation, so similar yet so different. But one thing for sure they have in common, both with flawless discographies. So now a little break from the death metal, and now we talk about one of my all-time favorites, and that is Mastodon. I will say, I think Mastodon, all their albums are really good too, classic. I mean, their debut album, Remission, in 2002 was like an unexpected kind of album at the time, where they were able to mix like the southern sludge metal sound with progressive metal songwriting structures. Then you get to Leviathan, where they kind of, more or less kind of did away with the whole sludge metal idea and start to embrace their more progressive side. And that was a classic for modern times. Blood Mountain, an amazing follow-up where they got even more proggy. And then Crack the Sky, which I will probably say maybe the best Mastodon album, where they pretty much solidified that, yes, we are a progressive metal band. Then you get to that more divisive period of the last decade where they kind of started to incorporate a bit of mainstream influence, but still retaining their prog roots. The Hunter, I thought, was a really good follow-up to Crack the Sky. Once More Round the Sun, that's the one I've listened to the least, but it's still really fun. Emperor of Sand, where they kind of was able to kind of balance their more mainstream side with their progressive influences better. And then Hushed and Grim, which was my album of the year of 2021. That was a double disc masterpiece of modern prog metal for damn sure. I will say top to bottom, Mastodon's discography is fucking, again, flawless, amazing. I've talked about Mastodon plenty of times on the channel, so I'll spare you the details, but check them out if you haven't already. Next up, another prog giant. Actually, the next two are both prog giants, but next, Opeth. I'd say Opeth has a flawless discography and maybe could make a case for them being the second best band with a flawless discography behind Death, at least for me. But yeah, Opeth, I love all 13 of their albums. Orchid was a great debut. It was much more raw, a little bit black metal inspired. Same with Morning Rise, but definitely kind of embracing a little bit more death metal and also getting even more prog. My Arms, Your Hearse, fucking amazing concept album. Same with Still Life that followed. Blackwater Park, which is a masterpiece. Deliverance and Damnation back-to-back. Like, perfect yin and yang albums, with Deliverance being maybe their heaviest album, and then Damnation, which signaled their more progressive rock albums that would come later on. Ghost Reveries was an amazing modern masterpiece as well. Watershed, the last of the death metal era, was a great send-off. Heritage, yeah, is my weakest, but it's still fun. It's still good for that more jazzy, prog rock, folk side. Pale Communion I really, really liked. Sorceress, kind of signaling a bit of a return to the metal side. And then Incauda Venenum, where they got much more heavier, like more metal, even though no death metal, it's just like a prog metal, prog rock hybrid. And we should be due for a new Opeth album before too long. Maybe next year, I see we'll have a new album, probably next year, which I can't wait for, because I love Opeth. Who doesn't love Opeth? If anybody hates Opeth, I'm sorry, but you need to go bye-bye. The penultimate band for this list, another prog giant, and that's Tool. Yes, I know, there's gonna be a lot of hatred at me for Fear Inoculum, but I think all 5 of their albums are great for different reasons. Undertow, which was more of an alternative metal album with prog moments. Then they became prog proper with Anima in '96, while still retaining a little bit of that alternative influence. The prog metal definitely shined through a lot more. Lateralis, which in my opinion is the best Tool album, that's a masterpiece of progressive metal for sure. 10,000 Days I thought was a pretty damn good follow-up. And yes, Fear Inoculum is a great album. I don't give a shit what anybody says. It's a great album. If you think it's terrible, I'm sorry, but you need. I guess sometimes it takes more than one listen for an album to click. I can understand that, and if it's taken time for people to get into Fear Inoculum, totally understand. But to just say it's flat out terrible, wrong. But that's just me, of course. But Tool, I think all 5 of their albums are great for different reasons, you know, exploring so many different soundscapes and exploring different kinds of atmosphere. Also, of course, Danny Carey's drum work. Who doesn't love Danny Carey? I can't think of anybody that hates him, but there you have it. And then the final band, Typo Negative. I'd say all 7 Typo albums are awesome. Again, for different reasons. You know, the first 2, Slow, Deep, and Hard, and Origin of the Feces, definitely that more thrashy, hardcore style, kind of like leftover Carnivore tracks, but mixed in with gothic doom moments, and the Black Sabbath influence coming in as well. Both of those albums are great. Slow, Deep, and Hard, that first album, and then Origin of the Feces, despite it being a fake live album, it's fucking awesome. And it's such a troll. Bloody Kisses, what more needs to be said? October Rust, what more needs to be said? World Coming Down, arguably the most somber, depressing album ever, but it's so fucking heavy and evil sounding. Life is Killing Me, really fun album for that more kind of almost poppy, like 60s, 70s pop influence. And then Dead Again, which I talked about a little bit during my Rarest CDs video. That was a great way to close it. Kind of like the blend of the first 2 albums and the middle goth era, and just mash it all together into a nice package. So yeah, Typo Negative, I would say, belongs on this list. And of course, that does it for my list of 10 metal bands with a flawless discography. Then there are many others I could have mentioned, like Avenged Sevenfold I could have brought up, and like I said, Cannibal Corpse, so on and so forth. There's quite a lot of bands out there, but these I feel are the 10 best metal discographies to check out, because there are no bad albums with these 10 bands that I mentioned. If you want to check them all out, you will not be disappointed. But anyways, what bands do you guys think have flawless discographies, and what band that has a flawless discography is your favorite. Let me know in the comments below, or if you have a channel yourself and make videos, make a response. This was a fun one from Hammerheart. And like I said, I'll link his channel in the description below. And until next time, horns high. What is this? I don't think I've ever seen that many zombies in a group.
I don't want to be out here anymore. I've decided I don't want to be here. Okay, never mind. I'm not heroic, as it turns out.
Uh-oh, we got a badass.
Okay, well, you know what? It was fun while it lasted.
Oh God, don't give up on